whenever you go to a gym, it's brilliant for your mental health, but no gym, or at least most of them, do not provide any direct support around mental health. Studio owners still seem to think that have that sterile environment, loud music and all that is somehow good and it motivates people, where in fact they find that very, very stressful atmosphere. So
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the used to be Gym Break Cast to now the Fit to Grit Cast. I'm your host, Zach Coleman, and today we have a very special guest from all the way, from my perspective, on the other side of the world. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself, introduce what you do, and we'll kind of go from there.
yeah, hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity to just talk to you and your viewers, Zach. It's great opportunity. Thank you so much. I'm Gabesa Clain. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Angel Gyms. We are basically two personal training only gyms in here in London. Yes, and one is in Southwest London, and the other one is in Shoreditch.
Beautiful. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your story? Like where are you right now with the studios, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, basically, I'm not from the fitness industry myself. I have a very strong background and passion in mental health. And after the pandemic, I built what was initially a very makeshift sort of personal training studio. And that kind of evolved into me looking more deeply into the personal training industry and really wanted to disrupt it a little because I felt that I found primarily two problems in the fitness and personal training industry, Zach. The first primary problem that I realized over time was the fact that gyms and personal training gyms, studios can be very intimidating places to be. They can be a sort of cold, very sort of in terms of how their atmosphere is. Primarily, the environment is very loud, very intimidating, very bright, and certainly for especially for demographics such as women, people like women, parents with new children, it can be a very chaotic, stressful, busy place. So I realized that one of the reasons for that is the way they are designed. So I set about to build two places which are completely different in terms of how they are designed. The second one, Zach, is that I'm actually from a mental health background and my passion is mental health. And I've always known and I've realized that whenever you go to a gym, anyone goes to any gym or personal training studio for their personal training, it's brilliant for your mental health, but no gym, or at least most of them, do not provide any direct support around mental health. So I set about to change that by incorporating a separate room within my studios, which have a psychotherapist in them. So it kind of bridges that gap between physical health and mental health. And as I said, the first one primarily is to transform the environment into a much more calming environment through how the place looks, feels, sounds, and everything like that.
What would you say some of the challenges have been looking at some of the models of, I mean, because you're right. You're 100% right. I mean, I'll just use this as a quick example because it's not just happening in with the actual clients, but it's that feel is also happening within the actual owner mentality as well. And what I mean by that is, we get a lot of studio owners in that see like our sub brand is Gym Mark, and one thing that they say right away is they get standoffish because they're like, well, you must just work with bro dude style gyms with the thing. And I'm like, no, not at all. Like, we work with all studios of all different sizes. In fact, me and my wife met in yoga. Like, it's not like
Right.
one of those things that I'm like, I don't look at gender and specificity in that way, but you're right. And I think that especially within the studio realm, you saw a very
Yeah.
similar shift that I did.
Yeah.
And so back to my question, what are some of those challenges? What made you realize, hey, and I'll just so the people in the audience can understand what this means is it's the experience. How did you understand that the experience of the gym was a kind of an ROI factor towards bringing in the type of audience that you wanted to bring in?
Yes. So I often liken and give people the example, Zach, that imagine yourself and or your wife, and your whole entire concept of this thing called a restaurant is where you walk in and it's McDonald's, right?
Mhm.
So that's all you've ever known that a restaurant could feel like and look like in terms of its bright lighting, chaotic atmosphere, very sterile, plastic everywhere, and you've got the bad smells, and it's a junk food place with bad food, but you've got the vibe is how McDonald's is. Imagine that the burger provided by McDonald's is great. Despite that fact, your experience of the burger will be really, really poor. Now, imagine that I took the same burger from you, Zach, and I said, listen, come over to and eat your burger at my restaurant where everything is warm lighting, the music is not stressful and all this loud techno and house and all that. It's intimately designed. The color scheme is to help you feel calm. Your entire experience of eating that burger in that other restaurant will be completely different.
Mhm.
Now, I feel like that's where the gym industry is that the gym owners and studio owners still seem to think that have that sterile sort of environment, loud music and all that is somehow good and it motivates people, where in fact, for a lot of people who are 30s and 40s and 50s, especially, or for example, women, or for example, new moms, they find that very, very stressful atmosphere. So I use that example. I can give you another example, which is that imagine if I gave you a best $200 bottle of wine and we drank it out of a plastic cup. Now, versus it's the same wine, but we drank it out of a beautiful glass, red wine
Mhm.
glass, and your whole experience of that wine will be completely different, but it's the same product. So what I'm finding is that you've got the situation where people are walking into these terrible environments. They're not realizing why, uh, until you take those same people and you put them into a different environment where so many things are considered, such as, for example, the use of natural materials like wood and all that sort of stuff. And you wonder why they might have a better experience, especially in the sub realm of weight training. And that's a really, really hard one because women and weight training, we've got so many examples of how this is transformative to females' mental health, to everyone's mental health and
Yeah.
physical health. Yet, weight training especially is even worse when it comes to those sort of toxic, loud, crazy, chaotic environments.
Yeah, you just kind of displayed a very both of those examples were very basic example of branding in a nutshell. I mean, there's more to it than that, of course, but I always like to use the example back to what you were saying about a restaurant, very simple one for people to understand because yoga studios have been trying to go this route for a long time. They've
Yes,
been trying to
that's right.
focus on that. But
Yeah.
they also don't understand they also haven't looked at the audience in depth like you have, target audience, and said, "Hey, how do we shift our paradigm on, hey, the services don't necessarily need it isn't based 100% on the services, right?" Seems like you did a little bit more target research. The biggest trend right now I see, and I have a exhibit designer friend here in the States that does a lot, who came from your side of the world, who used to be in the hotel industry, and it's a very similar perspective. Right now,
Yes,
they're
yes,
thinking
exactly.
hospitality, right?
Yeah,
They're thinking, "Hell, we have focus on hospitality, so let's have all our studios
yeah,
look 100% like,"
yeah,
again, to me, a sterile style wood. There's still wood, but there's lots of
yeah,
grays, and it's like
yeah.
they try to you know where I'm going at here, but
I
they
do.
look at that model and they say, "Hey, that's gonna work." I feel like what you're saying is 100% accurate. It comes down to, really just understanding, hey, the experience of the audience and knowing that, like, you've done your research basically. And I think for the audience listening right now, it's a good understanding of, hey, like, you wanna make a shift, you wanna make a change, or you're ready to expand. Don't just look at Facebook ads. Like, look at the underlining of your audience, the underlining of who you're really trying to serve, the community you're trying to build. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how those 2 studios are going. So you have 2 studios right now. What are some other challenges that you've seen as you've continued to evolve those studios, that you've had to overcome and try to move past?
Yeah, I mean, so there are the usual challenges, Zach, in terms of building in sort of smaller businesses, and one of the obviously the exact industry that we are in purely is personal training. So these
Yeah.
are personal training gyms, fully equipped as gyms, but for only for personal training. Um, there is still the fact that people will see this. One of the challenges is that people out there see personal training as something more of a luxury or something that they feel like they can't always afford.
Mhm.
Indeed, one-to-one personal training is more expensive than if you went to the gym on your own. What we're educating people around is that when they invest in their health, by nature, they are already spending far less money if they do personal training by, for example, cutting down hugely on their alcohol intake, for example, on going out and meals out because you don't know how much calories you're consuming when you're eating out. And for example, you don't know what ingredients they're putting in and all that. And for example, alcohol that you might have at home, for example. So there's all this stuff that when you factor in, and it's about the challenges around educating people that when you factor in the amount of money you are already spending on eating out, eating in on junk food, meals out, Deliveroo, alcohol in, alcohol out, then it far exceeds what you could gain if you spent that same money on personal training. And then, of course, then you're building your physical strength and your physical health and your mental health in a way that the other stuff actually takes away from. So it's win-win, really. So that's one of the challenges. In terms of building them, obviously you've got the usual elements, which are, for example, the marketing and kind of when you're a small place, having to go to the right, market yourself to the right clientele with restricted budgets, and how do you do that? So there is that challenge as well. Obviously, with the fact that we are designed quite differently, the inspiration is the 1940s, and it affects all parts of, for example, chandeliers, all the sorts of equipment, not the equipment, of course, but just everything is designed is very 40s, mid-century style. The challenge around that is for people who might think that actually it's not for them because it's too expensive, or is there like a huge fee? And then we've had that challenge because we've had to explain to people that, look, you only pay for your personal training with our model. So you don't pay these huge fees. It might look like a certain way, but we are focused around quality personal training at competitive rates. The final challenge is that, especially the United Kingdom, and this may not apply in the US, Zach, that a lot of people have had pretty bad experiences of personal trainers in the UK. The reason for that is that it's actually very easy to become a personal trainer in the United Kingdom versus other countries. So we have to educate people that we are building a brand around quality personal training and not just hiring, because the model that gyms employ, Zach, here is that they will hire any personal trainer who, no matter how good or bad they are, as long as they have the qualifications and they can afford the rent. But we, because these are our clients, we ensure that we've got a quality team who can actually look after them and actually give them real results, which they might not have had before.
Yeah, it's that quality, and it could that could be a stigma. I mean, over here in the States, I don't see it too much different. I see a
Yeah.
trend that's going on right now which is to me the whole opposite of what personal training is for, is accountability. I think that a lot of online apps are starting to come out, and you have
Yeah.
these personal trainers that are trying to market to the whole world. They're ending up going, "Oh, just go on my program and I'll,
Yeah.
do this," but then that doesn't leave any accountability. Like,
Yeah.
back to your mental health, and we can get into that in a second, the mental health attribute of, your studios and that being part of your brand and what you're trying to achieve, that's something that I think is very much been missing in the industry. That's funny enough, where this cast kind of was is me as a business owner.
Yeah.
I personally am. I mean, when I first started 10 years ago, great. And then I had kids and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to focus on the business. I need to focus on
Sure.
growth. I was burnt out. I
Yeah.
finally started to bring back that connection with the studios, which actually, due to that, it gives me my time for my mental health. Like that's
Yes.
my time.
Yeah.
I had to bring it back, and if I don't have my mental block for the day or going out, I mean, I already cut out drinking years ago, so I don't drink.
Right.
I try to eat as healthy as possible, but those are the
Okay.
things that are in our control as people, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
those are the things that are in our control as people. So when you
Yeah.
look at those expenses and say,
Yeah.
just like a business owner,
Yeah.
oh, it's a very similar concept. Like there's nothing wrong with trying to find someone that can help you guide you through certain steps of the
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
to reach certain goals. Is it going to
Yeah.
happen overnight with a gimmicky lose weight and lose 10 pounds in a week kind of system?
Yeah.
Probably not. But
Yeah.
you're going to start building mental clarity as well. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about how you're emphasizing that mental health aspect within your studios so that possibly we can kind of get the trend going and maybe other people can start finding ways to kind of bring that in to
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah. There's three ways. Firstly, is through a very, very important way, which is interior design,
Mm.
which is so, so, so important. Again, as I mentioned to you before, Zach, the example of if you're only the knowledge, if your entire life has been that your only thought process around what a so-called restaurant is that it's McDonald's, right? Or Burger King, and you had no idea that a restaurant can look like let's say just a really nice fancy intimately lit restaurant. Your experience would of course be different. We I
Yes.
think that's
Yes.
beyond it. Now there's so many elements that can help people's mental health because your environment helps your mental health, right?
Mhm.
Now, for example, with the elements that were specifically that come to my mind are the music. So we play very chilled out 1980s sort of chilled vibes, as opposed to we have a policy of not playing anything loud or sort of not loud, but like a fast or anything like super house music or trance or techno or anything like that. This crazy music that you often find in weight training environments. The other thing which is so important is how lighting can transform any space. And whenever you have any environment, gym, cafe, restaurant, anything which has harsh, cold overhead lighting, it will destroy the atmosphere and it will make you feel more anxious. Because studies have shown, and every study has shown, that warm lighting makes people feel better and less stressed or anxious rather than cold overhead lighting. So the lighting is so hugely important. Then you've got the use of natural materials like wood. And the reason again is that because it goes back to that part of our brain, all humans have that part of our brain, Zach, which is from the caveman days where we feel comfortable, where we've got surrounded by nature,
Mhm.
or wood and things like that. Whereas if you look at all these, including luxury gyms, Zach, full of glass and steel and things like that, and
Yeah, that hospitality look. They're going to have that hospitality look.
exactly, exactly, and somehow thinking that that's how to do it, but it's not. Someone thought of it as a great idea, but it doesn't mean it is. I mean,
Yeah.
then on top of that is color psychology. There is huge, huge sort of psychology around how different colors make you feel. As an example, Zach, if I went into your bedroom and I painted everything was the same, and I painted your bedroom, Zach, bright red. When you go into the same room, I can almost guarantee you will feel less relaxed, right?
Mhm.
So hence why when you see gyms with their bright white clinical walls and all that sort of stuff, with combined with the harsh overhead white, sort of bright lighting, it can make people feel anxious and on edge.
Mm.
And especially when you have weight training, Zach, you've got this environment where you've got these guys on edge trying to pump iron, and then you've got women who, especially with nowadays, we're trying to encourage women to do weightlifting, especially because it's unbelievable the transformative effects. But you can take a typical woman and put her in that environment, and she's not often going to feel that great. But if you then do things, for example, by softening and putting a calming color scheme, soft materials like velvet, it does actually make people feel more at home, especially in an environment where you don't associate it with, and it can make everyone feel better in terms of their stress and anxiety levels. The second aspect is the weight training and personal training industry is unfortunately renowned for very kind of like traditional personal trainers, people who are like pushing you hard and screaming and shouting, and you still have that aspect, especially weight training gyms. So we've got a policy to only hire personal trainers who have a very empathic, caring approach to how they communicate with our clients. So their personality is key. And the desired effect is to help all our clients, make them feel less stressed and anxious when they're going into the gym and going to meet us. And then the third aspect, as I mentioned to you before, is the fact that as transformative as the as weight training is for your mental and physical health, it will never really replace the transformative benefits of talking therapy, psychotherapy, right? Obviously, and we find this the world over that personal trainers end up being clients, they're counselors and psychotherapists to their clients because their clients often are not accessing psychotherapy services because there's a stigma around that, especially with men or whatever. And it can be really tough. So, by having an in house psychotherapist, it really, we're encouraging people to go to see her and to kind of get the additional actual psychological help at the same time as well.
You brought up a lot of interesting stuff there. There's a whole bunch there to unpack. And the
Sure.
first thing that comes to mind, because I preach this all the time in
Yeah.
color theory.
Oh,
You
right. Oh, great. Okay.
a lot
Yeah.
in the environment of a studio. Going back to your black and red, I actually gave a very
Yeah.
similar example from a much easier example. Was hey, if just so people could kind of understand, it's like if you're going to have a yoga studio, you're not going to do reds and blacks
Yeah.
because you're not going to attract the audience because, like you said, their experience coming in isn't necessarily going to be hyped up energy. It's gonna
Yeah.
be soothing, mental,
Yeah.
relaxation,
Yeah.
and you have just nailed down, like, the epitome from the interior design perspective, how to psychologically bring value to your audience, which will bring tremendous ROI as you continue to grow, because what it does is it starts to build a certain community, right? And
Yes.
you start to be able to target a little bit more specific. And what happens? You start bringing people in that have similar values, that they
Yes.
start telling their friends, and they build advocacy. And so, within the color theory perspective, we're very big on not the interior design. I don't do interior design. I'm a visual communicator at heart. So very big on how do we spread that similar message outside the gym and that same experience? How do we showcase that amongst your team, your future audience? And so we kind of preach a very similar thing from the color theory perspective, like how much impact it could really make. So when studio owners are really thinking about, hey, my Facebook ads aren't working, I'm trying to just bring in all this business and they're getting all these unqualified lead, which is kind of funny enough, a way the industry has gone from a marketing perspective that I look at and I'm like, dude, this should not be how you're marketing your studio, especially now in 2025. We're dealing with where the environment has changed. People want to find a place of community. And I feel like you have a very good sense of that color theory perspective, utilizing a different form of communication to give the same results.
You're absolutely right, Zach. I mean, again, I hope the example of a restaurant is applicable to you, because obviously we can all agree that. I mean, well, even with that sector, the hospitality sector, Zach, you can be a restaurant owner, and I'm sure that if you were the best guy, you were an incredible CEO of your, and you've got your own business as a restaurant, Zach, you people will come for you or your family or for your staff. I get that, and that's so crucial. But there's a big problem. It's there's so many other elements that we neglect, and
Yeah.
that's the issue. And I feel like it's a bit like when you're training your body, Zach, and you're doing everything right, but you're also then hugely drinking a bottle of wine a night, right? So you're kind of, if you imagine that example that I've just given you, and let's say you're doing the weight training and you're going to the gym and you're putting all the work in and you're eating fantastically, but you're just doing one thing, which is 2 bottles of wine a night, right?
Mhm.
It's fair to say that you are probably destroying a huge, that one tiny mistake of a couple of bottles of wine a night, which, for whatever reason, even one, will pretty much destroy or severely hamper the entire effort that you're making. So it's the same with the gym. So we're designing or creating a building successful gym that makes it, because, for example, you could be doing all that, and as you just said, which is that you're communicated, you want to get, and that's great. If they're going into an environment, I'm not talking about your particular environment, but if, for example, they're going into an environment where you've still got other things which are making me people feel like, oh gosh, like, for example, what I mentioned about the music and the sound and all the other stuff, then they're still not going to feel that great. They're not going to have the best experience. But those things are so easily rectifiable, which is the frustration point for me, which is it's so easy to rectify that, but people don't think about it.
Well, and I don't necessarily think they don't think about it. I think very similar to your restaurant example, I think that the environment has just of the industry has just not been able to mold, this is where it's going. Like, this is where it needs to go, right? And two, I think that we just live in a time where people are looking at, hey, I need to build business and ROI, and they don't necessarily they still go after the quick fix. They don't think about the long-term goals. I was on a panel with the CEO of SoulCycle last month, and
Mm.
we were having a conversation about smell, right? They
Yeah.
were telling me about how they really focus on the aspect of how do we dictate ROI based off of smell. Like, they sit down every year, they look at, they have a certain, scent meter, they have a certain situation where they test the scent, and then they're able every year to say, hey, did we lose more? And of course, it's not the only factor. Like you said, there's more that goes into it, and looking at it as a whole, that goes back to what you said about the interior design. I think that they don't look at it because they're like, well, me changing the colors of my gym aren't going to bring me 10 new members tomorrow. When in reality, it's going back to that, hey, really thinking about your audience and the advocacy of how you can bring value to them. Like you did, you were like, huh, I know that this environment is going to suit our audience better for the well-being of what we're doing. And now that you kind of talked about that, you kind of mentioned a little bit towards the end there, the types of, and we could get into the red and black thing constantly. Like, it drives me crazy how every studio does red and black
Yeah.
constantly. It's like you're not even separating yourself at this point. But
Yeah. Okay.
how the look and feel and how what you did and working on the mental health side. So let me break it down a little bit. So you have your visual communications from the exhibit design spectrum. You have your kind of offerings and your not really offerings, but your vision. Your vision of, we're going to focus on mental health and your audience of this type of audience. How did that play into and you talked a little bit about weightlifting, which is unique. You would assume that someone would come in and be like, we're just gonna create a yoga studio at this point, because the offerings match that type of environment. What made you, when you look down deep into this audience, really decide to say, hey, let's focus on basically your training packages? Like, how does your training really affected by these other aspects of your experience.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you've made a very, very, very strong point, especially with what we are specifically doing, Zach, and that is weight training, heavy free weights. It's super important to stress that that is the that's the kind of industry that we're in. We're not, yes, we're fitness, we're personal training, but that can encompass, for example, other things like boxing and all sorts, and which we don't do. We are very specifically focused only on free weight training, right? Which is getting stronger and physically lifting weights for men and women to get stronger and build muscle. And our basic premise is muscle is medicine. And only in the last year and a half has this been spoken about more, that, of course, this aesthetics around having a great muscle like you have yourself, great biceps, everything looking great is one thing. But where people are going with weight training is that, and realizing, and the studies are showing this, is that people who have more lean muscle are able to guard themselves against so many different diseases and elongate their entire lifespan and protect themselves against so many things that come at them physically or mentally, whether it's childbirth, whether it's any disease, whether it's an injury, whether it's preventing pretty much every type of disease. Muscle building is transformative. It's actually only been in the last couple of years, Zach, that I've actually seen more and more studies around this, and this concept around muscle is medicine has become more and more clearer, especially for women. But again, that's where I fit in terms of that's our focus. But as I alluded to before, it was this particular environment is even more the weight training environment can be even more toxic. It can be how there's a lot of kind of this, grunting and this where people feel like they're on edge and feel like they are being judged or have to compete with other guys, and it's not good for men's mental health neither. So when they have to be in that environment, so transforming it already for them, for the male market, for the traditional heterosexual male market is already something which we're delivering differently. But we wanted to do this for everyone and to actually show that regardless if you're male or female, gay, straight, whatever, that this we want to make this environment as comfortable for you and to make this as enjoyable for you, which is a traditionally very toxic male environment in many places. Even commercial gyms, when you go to the weight section, that's where we've had a lot of issues in this country, in the UK, around females feeling a bit intimidated,
Yeah.
they'll being checked out, inappropriate comments, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think that you've done your homework, and I think to get close to the end of this, something that I think that we can really touch on here is your ability to look at it from a different perspective. You talked a lot about at the beginning. I want to disrupt the industry.
Yes.
Now, I think that this industry needs to look at outside help, in short, to say, how can we make this industry better? How can we improve this industry? And I think you coming in from the outside perspective, in a different industry, but still having an understanding of it enough that you could come in and be like, how do you do this? Me, for instance, I came from more of the sports industry. And yeah, you could say the sports industry, it was when I first started, it was very similar to the fitness industry, but then I grew, I evolved, I changed, and trying to mold some of those different types of systems that the sporting industry has in to studios and how they can evolve their marketing and how can it can evolve their writing and things of that nature, I think has been a way that I've positioned myself, talking a lot about not just, oh, hey, I used to own a gym and now I'm owning another gym, or now I'm doing this. I think that in my industry, we get a lot of people that say I used to own a gym and now I'm in marketing. And I'm like, Well, I'm in marketing and I've worked with 80 different types of industries, and now I'm just focusing on studios. So I think I have a little bit more experience in the marketing side than,
Yeah.
than a studio owner that, knew some of the experience. But that was a rant. But I'd
Yeah.
say that that's probably very kudos to you that you took that leap, you took that perspective, and to try to help people understand you, connect with have audience wants to reach out to you to learn more about your studios and what you're really trying to grow with your vision. Where can people reach you?
Yes, so they can reach us via our Instagram, which is at Angel Gyms or angelgyms.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'll throw those in the show notes for anyone either too who would like to just go over there and give them a shout out or give them a look or reach out to them on any of their platforms. And again, I really appreciate you being on, Gabriel. We're gonna do something here. Only a few guests that I say this to, but we're gonna have you on like 6 months to a year. I want you to come on. I want you to come on frequently. I want you to come on and we can go. Only so much we can talk about in an hour, and I'd love to
Sure.
have you back again and continue to see how we can bring value to your audience and
Yeah.
to the community as a whole.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Zach, and I appreciate the time and for you to sort of speak to me about what we're doing, which has been a great opportunity for us as well. So thank you.
Beautiful. Well, just for everyone to know, well, thank you again for joining us for our new improved Fit to Grit cast. I'm your host, Zach Coleman, and I hope you all get your visionary time on today.